So, Rebecca, you want to read a poem?
Yeah. So I always think when I come on here, what's something I can say that can inspire or can remind you of something you might have forgotten or introduce you to something that you might not know about. So the poet Nikki Giovanni died 2 days ago. She was 81 years old, lived an amazing life. Black, lesbian, butch poet. One of her claims to fame is that she was a poetry teacher at Virginia Tech, and the Virginia Tech shooter was in her class. And from his work, she alerted the administration and said, something's really wrong with this person. You need to have eyes on this person. And they didn't listen because she was a poet. And there's a super powerful interview with her after that. Also, one of my favorite clips of her is she was on Def Poetry Jam. Do you remember that show? Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's like a show, like young people were on that show, right? It's like kind of a poetry spit kind of thing. And she just comes on in a suit and tie and fucking just knocks everyone out of the water. It's just like her power is really intense. So I got to see her in New York. Late 90s or early 2000s. She did a double bill with Walter Mosley, who wrote Devil in the Red Dress. Like, it was like the most powerful double bill. I think it was at like the New York Library or something. It was just the two heavy hitters. So I'm going to try and read this poem. I'm not going to do it any justice, but it really touches on the work that we do here. So she was born in 1943 and died just 2 days ago in 2004. It's called A Journey. It's a journey that I propose, and I am not the guide, nor technical assistance. I will be your fellow passenger. Though the rail has been ridden, winter clouds cover autumn's exuberant quilt, we must provide our own guideposts. I have heard from previous visitors the road washes out sometimes, and passengers are compelled to continue groping to turn back. I am not afraid. I am not afraid of the rough spots. Oh my God, sorry, I screenshotted this and it's doing horrible things. I have to go back.
Yeah, I saw you frantically tapping on the phone, and I'm thinking, what?
Okay, let me.
Is she playing like a video game at the same time?
No, I'm having technical difficulties as usual. I have heard from previous visitors the road washes out sometimes, and passengers are compelled to continue groping or turn back. I am not afraid. I'm not afraid of rough spots or lonely times. I don't fear the success of this endeavor. I am raw in a space not to be discovered, but invented. I promise you nothing. I accept your promise. Of the same, we are simply riding a wave that may carry or may crash. It's a journey, and I want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A poem I understand for once.
Yeah, I mean, all of her work is very accessible. She's very famous for her love poems. If you're looking for real love poems that are like about how love is complicated and painful and beautiful.
So last night we
had a sweet time last night.
Christmas / Hanukkah lights / Rebecca's birthday lights. And I asked if you wanted to talk about the United Healthcare thing. We should mention that today is December 11th, so this episode will come out significantly later, probably in January at some point. So if anything's happened between now and then, as of right now, there is a suspect that seems very likely to have been the individual, and we've learned a little bit about his life. But I wanted to ask you what you think of this whole thing. And well, the first question you watched my video.
Yeah, I was super impressed.
Oh, thanks. And I wanted to know from you, what your experience is like with United Healthcare in comparison to other insurance companies.
Yeah, so I won't work with them. So for people who don't understand like how being in private practice works, you have a couple of choices. You can just do private pay, whereas clients don't use insurance, or you can be insurance out of network, which is this whole own battle, or you can choose to be what's called paneled, which means that you've agreed, you've filled out the hugest packet of paperwork you've ever filled out in your life, and every 3 months you have to reattest that it's still all true. And
panels aren't always open.
Right.
It's a bit of a privilege to get in on the upper end insurance companies' panels.
Yeah.
And if you're on a panel, then that means as a customer, if you have like Blue Cross and you're looking for a therapist, they will give you a list of contracted therapists that will guarantee a certain predictable low copay. Whereas if you go out of network, then you have no idea what the copay or what the reimbursement is going to be like.
Yeah. And so to be paneled, I think for most companies, you need to at least be licensed in the state that you're in.
Fully licensed. Yeah.
Fully licensed. It doesn't transfer. Like I looked into getting licensed in Oregon, and I would have had to get letters from my supervisors. And when I wrote them, and I said, most of my supervisors are dead. Like I've been in the field for 25 years. And they said, can you send us obituaries that these people are dead? And I was like, this is too hard. I can't.
Are you licensed in Oregon?
No, because of that. If somebody wants to help me find the obituaries to all of my supervisors, or why?
I have to say, you're one of the few therapists that I know who actually is paneled still.
I know.
Because there's so much money in Seattle that most people don't need to do that.
It's a social justice issue.
Right, because that was the thing in the past, was that in order, in the beginning of my career, for people to be able to afford me, they had to use their insurance. And it was always best if I was paneled, because then that would reduce costs for them. But it also reduces our fee.
Right. So my income is supplemented by people who can pay my full fee. I also lead workshops. I'm on this podcast. I have other sources of income.
And the insurance companies will pay drastically different prices.
So
you'll have like Premier, we were talking about last night. You told me that right now they're at about 135.
Yeah, and
so they cap it out, even if your fee is 250.
And it's never risen. I mean, that amount,
it has. I mean, I remember when it was 120, and I remember even before when it was 110.
And there's some companies that pay 117, and there's this whole.
But there's also some companies. I mean, I don't know what they're paying now, but like Cigna or United, that'll pay like 60 or something.
Right. Yeah. So personally, to run my business, I decided 15 years ago that I am not paneled on United Healthcare. I do not work with them because they pay so little. And there's the other thing about being paneled is that you fill out these little forms, or I have a billing service that like sends them the claims. And the trick is they need to pay you right back without answering any questions. So that they've decided that the fact that you're paneled and that they trust your judgment as a provider, there's like no more discussion. And that's what I need for my sanity. With United Healthcare, they fight you on absolutely everything or reject. Yeah. My experience is they just rejected me all the time.
Yeah.
And I had to decide this isn't worth my time. Like as soon as I count my time as a therapist in the session, plus any added administrative stuff beyond filling out the little forms on a computer, I've lost money at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And I can't know, but my speculation is that they know fully well, because they're the experts, they understand how these things work, they see all the numbers, that if they ratchet up the intensity of scrutiny and even require certain pushbacks, that it will result in the aggregate in more profits for themselves and for the shareholders. And what ends up happening is that clients, patients will give up because they say, well, I need mental health care, and my health insurance that I'm sort of locked in on with my employer is just giving me too much trouble, and I'm already having enough stigma and self-hatred that I even need therapy to begin with. I don't want to get into an arguing match with strangers on the phone to justify that I deserve help. And I've been traumatized to believe I don't deserve help by my family and by society. So this all lines up that I'm just gonna eat this and pay out of pocket. And for the providers like you and me, we try to make it work. For myself, I tried to make it work for years before I realized that it wasn't just a time issue, because that was a thing, but it was an impossibility. It was like an insanity thing for me. Like it was like being gaslit, right?
Yeah.
And for the sake of the clients that were coming to me, I decided not to work with United because I didn't want to put more clients through the ringer for the next 12 months going back and forth, acting like everything is normal here, And so most of those clients still worked with me because it's hard to find a good therapist. And especially after a few months of working with a therapist, most clients don't want to jump ship. So again, they would just eat it. They would just spend, instead of $20 a session, they would end up spending $120 a session, which is not trivial for people.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. And so about a month ago, this happens, like people have open enrollment and there's an option to change insurance panels at their work. And so clients will write me from time to time and say, are you on this panel, or what would the fee be on this panel? And we'll kind of talk it out. And a client who's chronically ill wrote me and said, United Healthcare is several $100s less a month. Should I switch to them?
And this was before the killing?
Yeah, this was about a month ago. And I said, no, don't do it. You have chronic health issues. You need your medication. You need your doctor's visits. You have ongoing medical issues. They will fight you on everything.
Yeah. And with the possibility
and I sent her your podcast. I was like, It's not just me.
Yeah. And I'm not an expert and I don't know, but I've heard from experts that if Obamacare, ACA, is rolled back as it's being planned by our government representatives, then the private insurance companies can go back to denying healthcare to you, insurance, because of pre-existing conditions, right?
Which means the body that you live in. Like, who is going to come to insurance with nothing that's happened in the past?
Well, not only that, but do we want to live in a society where you, for example, get laid off from work because the company is having trouble with their budget and you lose your health insurance and you have to switch naturally, but no one will accept you, or only the really crappy insurance companies will accept you at like really high deductibles and really high premiums. That's another thing about this whole thing that I've that's come into focus. It's funny that whenever we buy something like a car or a house or a candy bar, we're always referencing money, right? It costs this amount, right? But when it comes to buying health insurance, we call it a premium. Why the fuck do we call it a premium?
Right, it's rent.
I'd love to hear the history of that propaganda.
Well, and it used to be illegal in the United States to make a profit in healthcare, and it's Nixon and his friends that started the current system. So we didn't always live in this system.
So what do you think about the killing?
Great pain makes people make really intense choices. It is clear that shooting was highly planned. Looks like for months. They believe 3D printed the gun and the silencer. This is something that took an incredible amount of research. He's clearly very, very intelligent and got pushed to the edge. Obviously, I think murder is wrong, but what's come out of this is zero sympathy for insurance CEOs. The disparity of wealth in America. When an insurance company makes millions of dollars in profit off of American citizens who are struggling to pay their bills. And there's a statistic, I think like last year, 200,000 people died in America due to lack of health care. You know, this is a rage that is understandable to a lot of people, and there's a reason that he very quickly became a huge folk hero, and that there's almost zero sympathy for the CEO. Because people have been fucked over for a really long time, and everyone has a story of their insurance not paying something that's really medically necessary.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the philosophy or the position that people will say, well, he's just an employee. He's a CEO. He has power, but he's one of thousands of people that are just doing their job. He has a board of directors to answer to. He could be fired. And if he were to push back, he would get fired, or he wouldn't be able to succeed because the way that these things work is the way that they work, you know. He had a little bit to do with it. You know, he's part of a collective, I guess is the thing. And also, you know, murder is something much greater than bad business practices or something. What do you think about that? And I'm not saying that I agree with that. I just say that some people will say that. What do you think about that?
I think at some point somebody has to take responsibility in this country for what's actually happening. Is it the CEO of a company? I would sure hope so. I mean, you brought up Boeing in your podcast as well, and just so everyone knows, like, we live in Boeing Central. Like, on my way here, I drove by 5 abandoned Boeing planes on a train track near the stadiums that have been sitting there.
Are they still there?
They're still there.
Wow.
Like, turn those fuckers into housing. And there's a thing that happens in America where the rich are like, oh, it can't possibly be your fault. And I'm like, oh my God, take some fucking ownership. It's your fault. Just take some ownership. You needed to make these absurd wages for yourself. You didn't share in the profits. You didn't care about workplace morale. You didn't care about your customers. And, you know, I'm sorry somebody went full vigilante on you because they couldn't take it anymore.
Well, and people will say that the CEO is at least indirectly responsible and knew that this was happening, right? That people were dying because they were squeezing every penny they could. And they could have reduced the profits by a little bit to
allow people to actually have health care
and allow people to live. Literally, the decision between living and dying.
200,000 people died last year due to lack of health care in America. 200. I mean, could you imagine if we had a war and 200,000 people died? You know, like,
or if an undocumented immigrant killed 200,000 people.
Right. So if I were to say you have blood on your hands and there is a price for that, it's like, here's the reality. You've pushed someone over the edge to the point where they would commit murder due to the poor health care they received. That says a lot. That just says a lot. And if what comes, I hope to God what comes out of this is all of these huge companies that have contracted with United Healthcare, like AARP, this is the insurance that they offer to their members. If these companies who are aligning themselves with United Healthcare can take a minute and look and say, we're providing a super crappy product. You know, and no other business model is it like, here's the worst thing, please take it, and the CEO should make millions and millions of dollars, and the shareholders will make a lot of money for providing a really horrible product that kills people. Yeah.
I mean, I'll conclude by saying I still wholeheartedly, 100% hold that it was wrong to kill the CEO. It's immoral, it's criminal, it's wrong, and
this should
never have happened. What you would hope is that the outcries and the outrage that has been happening for decades now would have been heard by our government. I don't expect profiteers and capitalists to listen. I just don't. I would hope that they would. But what we should have is government that represents us, that is not presumably set up for profit, that they would represent us and protect us and have agencies and tax dollars allocated and regulations that and laws that actually protect the people. There is a lot in that direction for sure, because if we didn't, then we would truly be in a wasteland. But they aren't doing clearly enough, and there's just a philosophical effort by one side of the aisle to roll things back in the name of quote-unquote efficiency. But that's just another word for the rich getting richer and the poor getting fucked. So I just would wish that our government officials would and our representatives would actually represent us. But I can't depend on that because of a certain philosophical... I mean, just think about that right now. You could argue the most powerful people in our country are capitalists that are known criminals who have, to some extent, been convicted of these crimes. And when they talk about business and rolling back regulations, and people are thinking, yeah, that's a good idea, you throw your hands up, you're like, just look at who's telling you this. Look at who's delivering the message. They get all the health care they want.
Yeah.
What I'm worried about is that United will just rebrand and people will forget. They'll just change their name.
Yeah.
I mean, why is Comcast Xfinity? I don't know the reason for that, but I think I've heard from people and that Comcast had such a bad reputation that they're like, we need to rebrand. I don't know if that's true, but they are so powerful and they have their hands in so many pies, and they're paying off politicians out in the open. That's the system we have. You can just out in the open bribe politicians. That's what's happening. So, I mean, bribe is an exaggeration, but not really. So it's and who's bribing the politicians for us? I mean, you could argue our tax dollars are paying them, but they don't give a shit because that's something that has to happen. You know, when it comes to the people versus the corporation, we don't have those funds and the corporations do, and they benefit. Anyway, let's take a break. We get back. Let's answer some sex emails.
Sex.
All right, we're back from the break. So, anonymous patron, long-term patron, she says, "Hi, Dr. Kirk and Rebecca. I am 31 years old and I have a long history of sexual trauma. A lingering issue I'm having is affecting my ability to have sex comfortably. I will be having sex, enjoying it, and when I orgasm, it starts to feel good. And then right in the middle of it, it quickly turns into complete terror, dissociation, flashback, etc. I usually have to stop sex at that point. I have a therapist I've been seeing for 8 years, and she's great. We have been doing EMDR, which has helped a lot. I can't seem to shake the orgasm issue, though. It has gotten better over time, but 10 years later, it still affects me a lot. Do you have any advice to help with this issue? Should I be avoiding having orgasm altogether? Is there a piece of the trauma I need to focus on to try and heal? I'm not sure if pushing through is making it better or worse. I am dating someone new right now, and she's been so understanding, but I really don't want this to affect our relationship. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. End of email. And then I will say end of email. Rebecca, what do you say?
This is a great question. I'm so glad that this person wrote in. And you sent me a long list of emails, and I was like, this is the one I want to make sure that we get to. So in sex therapy, it's all about kind of slowing down and seeing if you can pick things apart. So I would have a ton of questions. My first one would be, does this happen when you do you orgasm alone? Does this happen when you orgasm alone? Does this only happen when you orgasm with other people? Is there a certain sex act that makes this more likely to happen than others? I would say my goal for you is that you not stop orgasming. But if we can slow it down a little bit and start to pick it apart, obviously, as soon as you start to feel that you're dissociating, you should stop. You shouldn't ever push through. That's not going to help things at all.
It could even make the trauma more intense the next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would hope that it sounds like you are with a partner who's safe enough to kind of investigate this. But definitely, we talked about this with the premature ejaculation. I believe that was what did you call them?
Boner problems?
Boner problems. So this is an issue of stimulation, and as you begin to get stimulated, different memories are engaged. So if there's any way to kind of slow that process down and kind of also investigate the memories and the flashbacks that are getting triggered, because that's going to help us figure out how these things are all connected. But I'm glad you're doing EMDR. That's great work for this. And also, has there been a time when you've been able to orgasm and it wasn't like this? Because that would be my other question. If you've only orgasmed and it's felt like this, then we've got some real relearning to do.
Or brand new learning.
Right. Yeah.
I will add that it's a possibility that with your therapist, although she's great and you are recovering from your traumas, there's a possibility that you and or your therapist are avoiding.
Yes, I was going to say the word collusion is coming to mind.
Yeah.
Unconsciously.
Yeah. That it's uncomfortable to talk in detail about this potentially, or the therapist is having their own countertransference, their own issues around this or something. I wouldn't be surprised if the two of you were relinquished of whatever barrier there is, then that trauma would start to be processed as well, and there would be some effect. I can't, that's just a shot in the dark in terms of what I'm getting from this email. The other thing is that there are two general categories that I would think about if I were the clinician. One category is that it's straight down the middle trauma and PTSD, because it sounds like that, in that there's an association there, right? That has to do with past trauma, and that PTSD and that trauma needs to be recovered from, and that might take a long time, but that's through habituation and exposure and emotional regulation and safety. It would be hard to do in therapy because you're not going to be orgasming in therapy, but you can do a lot around the edges, and then you can practice those things in bed with someone.
This is the somosexual work of Masters and Johnson, where you slowly explore the whole body in ways that feel safe with no hopes of getting to orgasm, so that you're stabilizing the body's experience of being sensual with another person outside of the context of abuse. So you're actually kind of rewiring the brain that this is a pleasurable, safe experience disconnected from trauma.
Yeah, but the fact that she can orgasm even to begin with points in the direction of another possibility, which is that this is an issue that doesn't require that much trauma recovery. Having an orgasm, for many of us, is one of the only time, unless you're a monk that lives in the Himalayas, one of the only moments where you're truly in the moment and you truly let go.
Yeah.
People call it death of the little death.
Right. It's in French.
They
call it
petite mort or whatever.
Yeah, this is a small death, which is a name of a roller derby star here in Seattle.
Oh. Is she small?
I can't remember, but I remember when they called that out, I was like, so funny.
And so it could just be associated with that. There are some people that without trauma actually
Yeah, many people cry after they orgasm. Like, it's a very intense experience.
Right. So it could be something that's more down to earth, if you will, and simple in terms of its recovery, that it's not related to some larger trauma and abuse and victimization that needs to be processed. But let's take a break. We get back. Another sex email. What do you say, Rebecca?
Okay.
All right, we're back from the break. By the way, this email goes into pretty graphic detail about being sexually assaulted. So if you're triggered by that, I would skip forward. Or really, this will be the last email that we're going to talk about in today's episode. So maybe just don't listen to the rest of this. Okay. Listener Marie from Poland, she says, how does one stop being used to abuse? I didn't have any sexual or romantic interactions until I turned 19, aside from pornographic consumption. At 19, I attempted a relationship with a 33-year-old. And just summarizing her email, they had a casual relationship, they had sex, she enjoyed it, and she found that she liked it rough with him. It was consensual up until a certain point. Going on with her email. One night, sex was painful, so I begged him to stop, to which he silenced me and raped me. I bled for around 2 weeks after. My mind buried the memory. I know that it hurt, but I can't recall how badly. Not long after, before turning 20, I met my current boyfriend, who is 32, and I have found that I'm still hypersexual, but now it feels natural because I'm not trying to prove that I'm not broken. He is always careful with me, even more so after I told him about my trauma. I still enjoy rough sex, and he's always respected my safe words. However, a part of me expects it to change. Mm-hmm. I feel doubt, like maybe he's waiting for the right moment to strike and show his true colors. Sometimes in a twisted way, I want to beg him to actually hurt me so that my gut is proven right, that I'm just some piece of meat to him. Does this feeling ever pass? Mm-hmm. It's illogical and not a real gut feeling of fight or flight. Am I left to forever doubt the possibility of being loved and accepted? End of email. Rebecca, what do you think?
So this is a classic example of post-traumatic stress, is that you're expecting danger, right? Your brain can't ever relax from the fact that there is danger around the corner.
Yeah.
And so the work here with a therapist or in some other way is to uncouple the sense of danger from intimacy. And also, there's some triggers here, right? The age dynamic is pretty close to what it was in the assault. So there's some ways that you might inherently be triggered here. But we've got to kind of figure out why. So if we were working together, I would kind of slowly work with you, like, when does your brain land there that danger is on the way? What are the signals that happen either physically in your body or in your mind, or does the memory come to the forefront that starts to put you in that place again of, like, this could be dangerous again? And we kind of, just start to untangle that. I mean, I am shocked how many of my clients, when they will describe something and I will say, oh, this is literally the definition of post-traumatic stress. And most people don't know what the definition is, which
right.
is that you're in a non-dangerous situation and you perceive it as dangerous, or your body goes into a danger response cycle. Yeah. That's it. That's why the diagnosis exists. That's what happens. Your body is in the past. Your mind or your body is in the past. So, there is work there to try and figure out also, what safety looks like and how to land on the sense of safety. So have we talked about the Buddha brain? This is the book that I recommend the most to clients. And it's about the science about how our brains are wired to land on the negative, which must have evolutionarily kept us alive all this time. But it's really hard to move our brains to land on the positive. And this is a lot of the work and therapy is my brain keeps going to the negative. And it's like, how can we, it's heavy lifting, get it to the positive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to know what exactly is happening. You know, sex is so complicated and trauma is so complicated. And
she didn't say that she perceives the danger only during sex. It sounds like she could just be sitting around and have those thoughts.
Right. It's a general schema of I cannot trust people, or I am inherently victimizable or something, given what happened to her, which is not uncommon for people to develop a schema like that. I will say that the listener, Marie from Poland, you have a lot of self-awareness for someone who's 20 years old. I would be surprised if other people your age have this much self-awareness. And you're asking all the right questions, and there's a lot of rationality in what you're saying. You're questioning this. You have a gut feeling that this new partner of yours, your new boyfriend, is going to rape you. You have that feeling. And your other mind is saying, well, I don't have any reason to believe that would happen. There's a lot of evidence saying that he wouldn't. So that's another part of it, is actually sifting through the actual differences between your current boyfriend and your first sexual partner.
I do this all the time in therapy. What are ways that you know that you're safe now?
Right.
What tells you that you're safe now?
Right. And as a part of that, honestly, and this is just statistical, that the vast majority of people, including men, are not interested in raping people. It's just a fact. So that, I think, needs to be emphasized. Not only not interested, but physically can't. The questions that you're asking are just really wise. You're asking yourself, well, I find myself trying to provoke my current boyfriend to rape me, to kind of get it over with, or just to kind of prove my suspicions right. And to be aware of that is so wise of you. The vast majority of people who engage in that subconscious process, which is understandable, by the way, are not aware of it, and thus will provoke, not that it's their fault, because if someone came at me and tried to get me to rape them, I still wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? So if someone's raped after or assaulted after a situation like this, it's still the victimizer's fault, the perpetrator, the criminal's fault. But to seek that out or to engineer it is a common thing. So the fact that you're aware of it is just so important, and points toward a lot of trauma. In your longer email, and you also mention it here in the shorter version that I edited, you're saying that you were physically harmed, and you remember that to some extent. It's like, oh, I was bleeding for 2 weeks after. But it seems that you're not appreciating, or maybe you're beginning to appreciate, the psychological trauma that you went through that is buried. And with processing, with recovery, with a clinician that specializes in this, then you might experience a reduction or an elimination of these experiences that you're having, where paranoid about your current boyfriend, you don't really feel safe with him. You could see a recovery from that. That is part of trauma recovery that I don't often emphasize, but I guess this is a time to do that. That it's well known in all trauma recovery models that narrative and meaning development or change is an important element of it, because there's a chance that the meanings that you pulled from that first relationship are to be questioned.
Right. And if that's your first relationship, of course, your mind is like, oh, this is what happens in relationships.
Yeah. Right. And who knows what those meanings are? It could be that all men are just a hair's width away from raping people, or I'm rapeable.
Or someone I trust will betray my trust.
Right. Or all the above or something. So those meanings are important to look at and unravel. But in order to do that, you have to have recovered sufficiently from the physicality of trauma, the PTSD, in order to even begin to look at those kinds of things. So, it sounds like that is important to do. So hopefully you can find a therapist in your area in Poland to help you with this. Any final words on today's stuff, Rebecca?
It used to be the model for sexual abuse to have groups where you talk with people and other survivors learn their stories, learn their coping techniques.
What would be the benefit of that?
Just that it helps normalize the recovery process and how complicated it is, and it looks different for everybody. And I think it was really about ending the silence to see that you're not alone in this. 1 in 3 women and girls experiences a sexual assault. And so, there's kind of a cultural silent norm. I mean, this is what the Me Too movement was all about, was people saying, I expect this. This happened to me. This is a norm for me. And so unwinding that is complicated.
Have you been following the P. Diddy case?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. I'm currently in the middle of a deep dive.
And I was in New York when he was like kind of at the height. Like I was in New York.
Oh, really?
98 to 2001. So that was like at the height of his.
Yeah.
And he was around. I mean, I worked across the street from his restaurant.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you hear the screams?
No.
That's a dark joke.
Yeah, but his power was palpable. He was a powerful man.
Yeah.
And people wanted his attention and they wanted the fame connected to him. And I could see people getting roped into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember that when he was with J-Lo. And she was suspecting that he was having affairs, and he had multiple cell phones and all of these things, and she finally left him. But I was thinking about that got a lot of press at the time. And, he has been that guy for a very, very long time. And if you follow the whispers back, he's been up to coercion and abuse for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when this episode with you, Rebecca, will come out. It might even come out after we publish the deep dive. But in terms of the timeline where I'm at right now, Berto and I have yet to record that, and I've yet to get to the full saturation point of my deep dive research. And the more I get into it, there's a possibility that Sean Combs, in my mind, will go down as the biggest by far monster that's ever lived in a variety of domains, not just sex, but crime and murder and psychopathy and sadism, and also charm, the whole package. Yeah, it's way bigger than I thought it was going to be. And now stuff's coming out about Jay-Z, and there could be like other people, at least accessories to these crimes, Beyonce, J-Lo themselves. I mean, maybe they could make the argument that they were terrified of saying anything, which I could believe, but this is pretty far-reaching. Other victims, Bieber and Usher and thousands of other young people who were trying to get into the business and being handed over to Sean Combs by their parents. And the fact that it was just out in the open, it wasn't a secret. With Harvey Weinstein, for example, the public wasn't, at least for myself, I didn't know. It wasn't a rumor that I had absorbed.
Although there was a character that was based on him in the show Entourage.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was well known in the industry, or at least rumored. But with Sean Combs, it was well known that he would have these massive parties and there would be a lot of sex and drugs and underage people. It was out in the open, and somehow it was just like, well, that's what hip hop stars are going to do. That's just the way that it is, That's even what we want them to do, because that's the fantasy of the, Great Gatsby / gangsta. That's what we want. We're all aspiring for that. And so, I think we have some reckoning ourselves, Anyway. All right. Well, that does it for that episode. Rebecca, where can people find you online?
I am most accessible on Instagram. It's very simple, very short. RTEXT, our text. If I see your message, I respond. That's where you can find me. I've got tons of workshops coming up.
Where can they find those?
I've listed them on Instagram. I made a flyer that's like classic me, like so low tech and low budget. That's clearly just made by me. I'm around leading workshops. And if you like tarot and you think I'm funny, once a month, me and Sylvia Ostay-for-More do live tarot readings. We both do a tarot reading for the same person. And if you want to be a participant, we're always looking for that. It's really fun and queer and sweet.
And they can buy your products?
They can buy my tarot deck, therapists who tarot, and some other products are on my Etsy page, which is also, I think, our text. I'm trying to work on branding here.
You think you're?
I always say this. Why don't you type it in right now and see what the name of
text,
my
Etsy.
This is part of my joke, is that every single time I forget the name of my Etsy store. But the deck,
our text
on Etsy, the deck gets unbelievable reviews. People just love it, use it. It works for them for personal work, for work with their clients. I am just continually touched.
Well, and you as a seller have 5 stars.
Yeah, it's a solid product.
Yeah, there are 115 reviews for the Therapists Who Tarot deck, and it looks across the board all 5s.
Yeah,
5 out of 5.
Yeah, it's the paint. People really respond to my visual artwork, which is so nice because I've never sold a painting in my life. So, like, the fact that I made a tarot deck completely of my paintings that sells blows my mind. And then Drea's questions for each card on the back are 3 kind of either journaling prompts or in-session prompts with clients. It's a super unique product.
And you have your Square the Circle art therapy workbook, and you also have your Vicarious Trauma Illustrated.
Yeah, and I want to apologize in advance that it's so expensive to ship internationally. It just is. Sorry, everybody. The deck weighs a pound. I don't have time.
Do you ship them personally?
Yeah, I do all of this myself.
Yeah. So you have boxes of inventory.
Yeah, which is always like, I joke I don't have Sudoku and I don't have a gym membership. I just manage my Etsy shop of decks that weigh a pound a piece. But it's always like how much stock to have on hand versus, stock that will go out. But yeah, they're there and they're beautiful. And if you're looking for something to give for Valentine's Day, when this episode comes out, they make a lovely gift.
Mm-hmm. And we're looking forward to the 2nd season of Queer Love.
Oh my God. I'm already talking about it. I can't believe that anyone's going to volunteer to be on the show. I'm fascinated to see what happens.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I guess people volunteer to go on these shows all the time, but it's like so exposing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of a mystery as to why anyone... I think that everyone thinks they're going to be the hero, and they don't realize that they come across in a certain way, and or they're just handing themselves over to the editors to do with it what they will. So I think there's that. I think there's just the normal narcissism that we all have of just like, I'm a normal human that people will totally respond normally to. And you don't realize the way you come across. But also, the shows, they put you in a scenario that you're not used to, and it will push you. And sometimes the producers will manipulate. They'll ply you with drinks and make you sleep deprived. And
yeah, that's the other thing. As someone who's sober, I could never be on these shows because I'd be so uninteresting because I'd be sober all the time.
I think there's a fair amount of people that don't drink actually on these shows. There's a fair amount of drinking, of course, but I've noticed, or it looks like there are some people that actually don't drink at all because it's less trendy to drink for young people these days, you know. But
do they ever smoke pot on these shows?
I'm sure they do, but
we don't see it.
We never hear about it. Yeah.
But ever since you've been like, I watched some of Love Is Blind. Like, I'll try and watch one of these shows on my own, like just for and I can't do it. I'm just like, I feel bad for these people. I can't watch any of this.
What do you mean? You feel bad?
They're just like being tortured, or they think they're gonna find love. Like, it's just so hard to watch.
Well, I think that's another reason why people go on these two shows is that there is a fairly high percentage when you do the math of people finding their one, the person that they're marrying. At first, when I think about the hit rate of people getting married, it seems quite low, but when you actually look at the numbers, it's actually pretty high. It's something like, I did the math on it, and it's over 7 seasons, something like 12% likelihood or something, or 8% like if you're a cast member, there's a percentage chance that you will find the person that you're going to marry. Now, maybe those marriages won't last, but which marriages do last, you know what I mean?
Right. Is it are you more or less likely than using the apps or anything else?
Right. And for a lot of people, it's really hard to find that person, you know, so it has that benefit. So I think a lot of people are just like, hey, if there's a percentage chance there, then I'm willing to take a month off work and do this. For Ultimatum, there's a lot of people that are really at their wits' end when it comes to getting married. They have been trying to convince their partner for a long time, and they just want an answer, right? And they've been doing various different things to get there. And then the show comes along and says, look, you know, we'll set it up so that you will be put to the test as a couple, and you'll either come out the other side broken up or married or engaged. And for some people, you know, that's very appealing, which you could understand. So I think there's some, because, you know, when we watched Queer Love season 1, a lot of the couples were very much in that tension, right? And it wasn't fake.
And none of the couples lasted from that show.
Are you sure? Because I think Sam and...
Oh, right. That one couple.
Yeah, because I actually talked to them off the record afterwards. So that's why they popped into my head. But so yeah, season 2. I am hoping it comes out in January, but I'm thinking it's going to come out in like April or May or something. But
so, and I should say the thing I'm most looking forward to next year is that the sex therapy conference is in Las Vegas next year. So, looking forward to that.
What, specifically for Vegas? Or?
Yeah, for Vegas. I think a lot of West Coast people will show up because Vegas is easy to get to. And this will be my first sex therapy conference. And I should say I've really been enjoying like my readings and learning, and it's nice to be re-engaged. And I'm loving it when clients like say I have a sex therapy question, and I'm like, ooh, like, and then I'm actually can be helpful because I've been doing all this reading and can contextualize what they're asking, and it just feels really nice.
You're done with all the... No, you're not done.
So it's 90 hours. I'm done with the 90 hours of Zoom classes.
Right.
I've probably done 45 hours of the independent study of 90 hours, so I probably have 45 hours more to go. Oh. And then I'm getting supervision.
Independent study meaning electives?
Like self-paced learning, like you watch the lectures online and you do the readings and you write the thing and you do all the things.
And you're doing the supervised.
And I'm doing my supervised hours right now, which is like, I think it's like 2 years worth. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah. It's like a whole other master's degree.
Yeah.
And did you hire my friend as your supervisor?
Yes, I did. Yeah. It took me, just for anyone out there who's looking for an outside supervisor and struggling, it took me 8 contacts to find someone that was a good contact for me. And thanks to you, because I actually called you begging. I'm like, look, I don't know what's going on, but I'm having no luck.
Meaning that you would reach out and
It just wouldn't be a fit. I mean, the other thing is like, I am so far in my career that a lot of supervisors are like, I supervise in this way. Can you fit into my mold? And I would say back, like, I'm 25 years into my career. Like, can you...
Like, fit how?
Like, I do this very specific type of couples counseling. And you will have to have a certain amount of couples in your work in order to be supervised effectively by me. Or I work from this humanistic mindset. Are you a humanistic therapist? And I would say back, like, look, I'm 25 years in my career. Like, can you laugh with me as we kind of feel this? And
these were more novice people, or
these are very experienced supervisors.
Okay. Yeah.
And they would write back like, no. I was like, well, if you can't laugh with me about the dichotomy that I'm experiencing right now of like being both very experienced and a complete beginner, we're probably going to be a horrible fit.
Yeah.
I knew that for me.
Okay.
And maybe like a year or two into this, when I don't need as much like super basic instruction, I'll be fine working with anybody. But right now I really, I have a ton of questions, and they're maybe not the question that every early sex therapist would have, because, I'm viewing it from a different lens.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk a long time, but I won't bore listeners but I ran into a bit of that 15 years ago when I went back to graduate school. I had been in the field for about 15 years by that point, and I was being supervised by a variety of experienced level supervisors, and I was being taught by people that were very wise, like Phil Cushman, and people that were not very wise, like some other professors. And it sounds like you are taking a much more upfront, honest approach. But what I would do is I would just try to blend in and just act the part of a novice, even though I wasn't. And there were supervisors that in the back of my mind the entire time I was thinking, my goodness, you don't know anything and you're not good at your job. And I know it because I do your job. I'm a supervisor and a professor and a therapist, and God help the novice people that are coming to you. But I just muddled my way through it because I had to get my hours, and I didn't have an alternative. If I had an alternative, and I tried to learn from what I could. I didn't just shut everything out, and I tried to check my arrogance or something, to say like, well, Kirk, you don't know everything, so calm down. But I basically lied by omission to those people, whereas you're not doing that. You're more authentic about that, which I can respect.
Well, you were also, I was in a situation, I'm paying for this. It's once a month. Like, it's a different.
Right.
And also I'm a horrible liar, and I don't want to pay to.
Yeah. I guess if you had
pretend.
Choices between a whole marketplace of.
Well, right. Like, we're both interviewing each other, like I'm thinking, can I work with this person?
Right.
But
it's a weird position to be in. To be that experienced and to be supervised and approached, in that way, as if you don't know what you're doing.
Well, and I felt weird in class too. I would argue with the professors as if we were two professors arguing.
Yeah.
Like, so there's this thing about how in sex therapy, there's nothing, you don't use the term sex addiction. You use terms like maladaptive sexual behavior. And I would really challenge them in terms of like, well, here's 10,000 ways that sexual behavior can be maladaptive. It was just interesting. Like,
yeah. And tell me if this is, a question that I'd love to hear your answer to. My perception is that, and this is just me from the outside of that world, is that we had almost no talk about any specific sexual topic in our field for many years. Then we started to talk about it, and initial forays into that talk was within the culture of stigmatization and simplicity and naivete, which included ideas like sex addiction and stuff. And you'd have all these people like Bill Clinton and and Tiger Woods and others saying that they're a sex addict when they don't have a compulsive sexual disorder. And so there was this pushback from experts as they emerged to say that there's so many problems with that term, and it's almost always used in this dubious manner, and it just further stigmatizes and buys into the whole sex negative culture. And so we need to push back against that. But the pendulum swung so far that they just completely did away with the entire concept in principle without acknowledging the fact that some people have compulsive sexual urges, which you could call an addiction in the same way that if someone is compulsive about their pot smoking or about gambling or about
right, how much
alcohol,
is it impacting someone's life? And
well, there's maladaptive, but right. There's also like compulsive where they
have to.
That's an itch.
Right.
It's a compulsive itch that they have to act on, whether it's pornography or masturbation or sex or something. It has all the hallmarks and therefore all the conceptual need and treatment in line with other addictions. You know, we don't have the word addiction in the DSM, but we do have the word compulsion, and I think that so. Does it seem like, because that's what I've concluded, is that the pendulum swung
went
so far.
Right. I mean, it's just interesting, you know, that they are so accepting. I don't want to get into everything that they were accepting about. We talked a little bit about it last night. But
oh, right.
But it is.
You don't want to get into that? You don't have to. So we
were talking about bestiality, or it has this other name of like zoo, whatever. But it, you know, there's this whole theory
Zoophilia,
for
maybe?
some sex therapists that if you're a non-acting offender, you can like support someone, and all of this. It gets very complicated. I'm sure we'll get tons of emails on this topic. But I was telling you that in the training, they expose you to absolutely everything under the sun so that you can be prepared for whether you want to do that work. And when the animal attraction stuff came up, I was just like, no, like, can't do that work. Nope. And they were like, do you want to look at your feelings about it? And, you know, in this point, like, I'm not your typical student where I'd be like, this fear, this coming out. You know, I speak with 25 years of experience. I'm like, nope, the power dynamics and, you know.
Well, remind me, is the position of the trainer that it's okay to have sex with animals?
The position of the trainer is that some therapists are able to do that work and be there for these people. And
with the effort of helping those individuals not have sex with animals?
I would hope, but we watched a video of someone a clinician who supported attractions and acting on those attractions, and it was incredibly disturbing for me. And
that segment was not the beginning of eventually the therapist, and the message was we need to be accepting of all attractions.
Yes. I can send you the video. It's on YouTube.
That's horrible.
I know. It was, my stomach is churning.
And to be clear, it's horrible because animals can't consent.
Right. Yeah. To say that my stomach is churning now, it was churning in class. I was so upset.
So you're watching this video of a therapist who is in full support. In fact, maybe even saying you deserve to not be stigmatized or something, right? Like it's a beautiful thing, you and your sexuality, that you are having sex with animals.
I feel like I'm going to vomit, honestly. Yes.
And the class and the instructor was not stopping the video and saying, by the way, this is deplorable. It's abusive. It's criminal.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of sex therapy training is being exposed to a lot of shit that's super intense.
Which I understand, but there should be a clear line regarding consent, right? I mean, they're not in support of people raping people, right?
No.
Well, then how in the world can they stand behind someone having sex with animals?
Then they said there's a whole kind of concept of non-offending people that have these thoughts that don't act on them, and how would you support someone? Could you do that work if someone insisted that they were non-offending? And talk about PTSD, I was like, my brain would always assume they were offending. Like, no matter how much somebody told me that they never acted on it, I am not their clinician. I am not their person. Yeah.
So at no point were they talking about animal consent?
There was a long, very lengthy group discussion about how many people in the training were like offended by this, and
so at no point was the topic of the fact that animals can't consent. That topic was not brought up in the class?
Yes, it was brought up.
And what was being said?
That many people felt that this was not okay.
Okay.
And they couldn't even work with someone that...
The class,
yes.
The students.
Yes.
But the teacher.
I'm like, have to be honest that I'm kind of blacking out. Like, okay. I can't remember.
So the teacher
details.
might have said that
yes.
It's not okay because consent can't be determined from an animal.
Right.
Okay.
If someone else has been through a program, please write in and tell us how this was discussed in your program.
Well, I've been to some really shitty ass classes and continuing education. I mean, sometimes I wonder if instructors are terrified of getting into it, you know, so they just like, well, I'm just here providing a place for discussion, and they provide no fucking leadership. I would experience this sometimes as a student later on, and you know, when I went back to get my doctorate, there'd be times when I would just see the professor just completely wimp out and just avoid and let certain ideas, maybe even tyrants in the class, lead discussions and say shit that needed to be pushed back on, and they wouldn't because they were terrified. So sometimes I wonder if that kind of stuff happens. But it also just sounds like you have trauma around this issue around animals, and that you dissociated or blacked out or avoided or
it was really hard for me.
And
also know that like we're doing this like you know like then we're doing youth attracted people next. Like I mean you're just like bam bam, but you're just like doing all these like incredibly controversial, not controversial but like dark web topics back to back to back to back.
Well, it conjures images and descriptions that you'll hear that are really hard to hear, you know, and you've been traumatized.
Yeah, it was
not by the animal thing, right? But by predators.
It was a lot, and I just, made a choice right then. Like, if this issue comes up, it's a hard no.
And that's hard to have a conversation in class among a bunch of people, and someone's just like, "What are your feelings about this?" and you're just like, no, get away from me."
Yeah. And also, I remember in class we were supposed to have our cameras on all the time. And I'm sure I was just sitting there like, no. Yeah. So there are dark parts of this work, and I'm not built for it. Luckily, there's a huge portion of the population that needs other things.
All right. Well,
that's dark.
And that does it for that episode of Psychology Saddle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because...
Hey, it's real rough out there, and just find joy where you can.